Boy, you think you can trust somebody just because they're rich, ambitious, sociopathic perverts, but that's not always the case. And Blannerhasset Island in the Burr conspiracy is a good example of that. Actually kind of gives me some Jeffrey Epstein Island kind of vibes. So Blannerhasset Island, you can read about it in Captain Rick Rhodes' book, or you can read it in R.E. Banta's History of the Ohio River. It's the 5th largest island in the Ohio River Valley. In the Ohio River, I guess, is sufficient to say. It's located at about 1.5 miles south of Parkersburg. And I would have taken some pictures while I was there because it's a public island, but there was only one launch site and it said no trespassing, official use only, and there was like an official vehicle there, so I didn't want to risk trespassing or whatever. And if I took a picture of the island, it would have just looked like any of this. You wouldn't have. In fact, here, I'll just tell you, that's it. Who knows the difference? Anyway, the island's named after Harlan Blannerhasset, who was an Irish nobleman, had too much money for his own good, and he married his own niece. And as a result, he was ostracized from his family, so he took all of his money and he bought this island on the Ohio River, which was at the time the frontier. We're talking 1806, and on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains, very remote. And he built an extravagant mansion, which was probably the most, adorned, elegant, mansion that this side, the west side of the Appalachians, where he entertained people who would come and visit him, who tended to be nefarious characters. There's a reason people go to remote islands to have conversations. So, enter Aaron Burr. I think R.E. Banta kind of sums up his personality fairly well. I mean, he was an ambitious fellow, let's say that, and he was constantly being undone in his plans to have New England secede from the Union so that he could be president of that new country, or whatever his different plans were, revolutionary plans. Alexander Hamilton was always talking against him. And so, just to quote, he was an unsuccessful candidate for the governorship of New York, having been vice president during Thomas Jefferson's first administration, who had himself, Aaron Burr, missed the presidency by 1 vote. He was a rather foppish, handsome little man with a fierce pride, a burning ambition, a glib tongue, and with no solid earthly virtues such as truth or loyalty or sense of duty to balance those superficial attributes. So he was an unsuccessful candidate for governor of New York in 1804, and during the campaign was the object of pointed statements concerning his past and probable future probity, which issued from an old rival, Alexander Hamilton. His defeat a certainty, Burr challenged Hamilton to a duel, and Hamilton quixotically accepted and was killed. Under indictment in New York and New Jersey, Burr sought the less squeamish fields in pursuit of a dream he had apparently conceived years before, though exactly what his dream was will probably never be known. But it probably had to do with the seizure of some part of Spain's holdings south of the Louisiana Territory. So remember, 1803 was the Louisiana Purchase, orchestrated by Thomas Jefferson, ironically. And Thomas Jefferson had also sent out Lewis and Clark on a 3-year expedition to go out the Ohio River, up the Missouri River, out to California to kind of lay the seeds for westward expansion. However, Aaron Burr had other ideas. So Aaron Burr went to Blannerhasset Island and met the incestuous Harlan Blannerhasset. And together they seem to have formed a plan where Aaron Burr would get a bunch of, basically be a fundraiser and get arms together. And he contacted General Wilkinson, who was governor of I think the entire Louisiana territory, and a former general in the Revolution. And another person who you didn't want to trust this guy. He was constantly making deals with, you know, the governor of the Spanish territory to bypass, you know, X, Y, and Z. He was always making deals and trying to, he didn't care about America. He cared about James Wilkinson. So Aaron Burr reaches out to him. He says, if I raise a bunch of money and troops, then I'll come down and then, you know, we'll seize the territory from Spain and we'll make our own country, basically. So he went back east. Even as vice president, he was reaching out to the British and the French, trying to get them to join in his scheme and give him money. And so he wrote to Wilkinson for private expedition, which would start from the lower Mississippi from its rendezvous on Blannerhasset Island in Ohio. So Aaron Burr does go back east. He raises some money, gets to Blannerhasset Island, but General Wilkinson now made the last of his most important double deals, this time, as it chanced, for the benefit of his country. Wilkinson had heard that news of Burr's activity had come to Jefferson, and fearing to continue his association, he ordered the men of Burr's flotilla arrested when they reached the lower Mississippi. So then Burr went, and of course Blannerhasset was also arrested too. He got a little bit further, but he got arrested. He spent more time in the brig than Aaron Burr. Of course, Aaron Burr is ex-vice president. So, murderer, ex-vice president, and now he's accused of treason. And Aaron Burr's trial was, as you can imagine, a sensational thing, like the OJ trial when I was young. And turned out that John Marshall, the head of the Supreme Court, was proceeding over the treason trial. And Marshall and Jefferson were always butting heads. And Marshall demanded that Thomas Jefferson hand over paperwork which showed that Aaron Burr was guilty of treason. Thomas Jefferson said, I'm president, I have executive privilege, I don't have to hand anything over to you. John Marshall said, well, then in that case, Aaron Burr, you are acquitted because as far as I can tell, there's a First Amendment and a Fourth Amendment, and you didn't actually commit treason. All you did was talk about it. So, boom, that set the precedent for executive privilege when it came to the Supreme Court and trials and stuff like that. And Aaron Burr got off. And although he was acquitted legally, though, he was not acquitted in public opinion. He had to leave the country for a while, go live in Great Britain. Ironically, he came back, and in 1835, when we were about to invade Texas and stuff like that, talking about the Mexican-American War, he said, what was treason in me 30 years ago is now called patriotism. And Wilkinson got off too. Blannerhasset, he didn't do so well. He lost his fortune, tried to invest in a cotton plantation. That didn't really work out. And him and his wife died kind of penniless. So there you go. That's the Burr conspiracy on Blannerhasset Island. I would just say there's a certain type of people in American history. You might call them adventurers. I think that was a nice term for it back then. Basically people who are trying to get to the top, and they only get they get near the top, you know, and then they band together with their rich friends and they say, well, you know what? I deserve to be on top, And if the system doesn't let me go on top, then the system is wrong, and we're gonna overthrow it despite of the popular will. And if we have to be illegal in our actions and immoral in our actions, well, that's okay, because the ends justify the means. I only live one life, and if I'm gonna make it to the top, I gotta be willing to do whatever it takes. Julius Caesar was kind of like that too. That's why the Roman Republic ended. And some might say we're on the verge of the American Republic ending, because we apparently view that sort of mentality as a public virtue now, rather than a foible. Anyway, speaking of foilable, maybe some public documents should have been shared by Thomas Jefferson, though, to actually convict Aaron Burr, because that would have set a good precedent, because that sort of adventurism sort of continued. And can you imagine, though, if Burr had been successful, he would have formed basically another nation that would have prevented the United States from expanding westward. It was completely in opposition to Thomas Jefferson's policy agenda and his plans of westward expansion through Lewis and Clark. So, I mean, that's the other thing. Back then you had a vice president that was often from the other party, because they would be, it was whoever got the second most votes for the office. So it was usually the other party, as it is today. So it would be like today if you had a Republican president and a Democratic vice president. They're always acting at counter purposes. You can't get anything done. You got to have a team where everybody's on board with the same policy agenda. And you don't need somebody constantly stabbing you in the back. That's basically your second lieutenant, or the person who's going to succeed you. I mean, that's another thing to keep in mind. Geez, you don't want an enemy of the person that can meet all of their ambitions if you just happen to die or get removed from office. You got to watch out for that. So anyway, lots to learn if you read about the Burr conspiracy. It's got its own Wikipedia page. Blannerhasset Island has its own Wikipedia page. And just read about Aaron Burr, man, and you can learn a lot about the constitutional history of this country, and a certain kind of character that usually just makes it into power. And then if they do make it into power, they mess things up, because they actually don't really have a lot of good ideas. They just faked it just to get there. So anyway, be careful of those rich, inherited wealth, sociopathic perverts, man. They're not always on your side.